TVs are super cheap now, and you can get a massive screen size for under $1,000. But the question is, should you, and are they any good? The TVs I'm going to be testing are the Insignia Amazon Fire TV for a budget basement option, the TCL QM7K, and the Hisense U7 series. Now, I've included links in the description below to all of these TVs if you want to check them out for yourself. Now, there's a ton of cheap TVs out there, but for this video, these are what I could get my hands on. So I'm testing a bargain basement option against some highly recommended budget to premium budget TVs in the TCL and the Hisense. Just a note here, these are all LED or QLED TVs because they're still a whole lot cheaper than OLEDs, and you can get an amazing picture in a budget QLED TV. I'd love to test out an OLED, but that's for another video. So let's start out first with the bargain basement option. This is the Insignia Amazon Fire TV. This one is the F50 series. It's an LED, and it has 4K Ultra HD and also HDR10. This one's 50 inches and I got it for $160. This TV is going to work best if you have an Amazon account. You're going to get served a ton of ads through the menu system. The menu here is a bit clunky. It does have the top apps you use displayed, as well as ads up top, which start auto playing, which drives me absolutely nuts if you just leave the menu system on without taking an action. First off, picture quality. I've loaded up the HBO Max app and I found Elf in 4K Dolby Vision, which is HDR, and we are in standard picture mode. Overall, it's pretty bright, actually, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't really think this looks all that like HDR. It looks like the backlight has been cranked up all the way, which it probably is in standard mode. And the contrast ratio here isn't all that great either. The picture kind of just looks muddy and washed out. There's quite a loss of detail in the shadows, and the blacks definitely look more gray. The picture quality is fine. It's honestly better than I thought it would be at 4K. And the motion blur actually seems pretty decent too. This is 60 Hertz. And some of those displays do have kind of trouble with that soap opera effect. One thing though, the colors look pretty bad to me. Skin tones seem blotchy and a little too saturated, and the shadows are pretty crushed and have almost no detail. Now there are a few picture modes here we can choose from, and you can customize your own settings. For the purposes of this test, I'm leaving pretty much everything on standard, but I did want to show you the movie mode, which I think is the best preset if you just don't want to stay in standard. It's a lot less bright. It doesn't look as unnatural, but it does have kind of that warmer tinge to it. Now, before I jump into gaming, I did want to show you something that I think is kind of strange. If I watch something in 1080p, and I've tried this on a variety of apps, it actually looks worse than other 1080p displays that I use. It's all blotchy and janky and oversaturated, and the contrast looks like it's been cranked way up, and there's quite a bit of artifacting and noise in the image. So I'm a little bit puzzled why the 1080p picture looks so much worse in this 4K TV than TVs I have that are 1080p from 20 years ago. So let's turn on the lights and see how it looks in a well-lit room. To me, it looks perfectly serviceable and easy enough to see no matter where I'm sitting. But there is a bit of reflection. And if you move off to the side, you will notice that the image quality deteriorates significantly. The matte finish on this screen is just a little bit too glossy maybe, and that does reflect quite a bit of light. Now let's boot up the PlayStation and see how this thing games. So I set up HDR on the PlayStation 5 and it looks okay. Not great, but not terrible either. For gaming, this just doesn't really do it for me. The motion is just not that great. It's a 60 Hertz display. You're going to get motion blur. You're going to get some jitteriness, some artifacting. And for me, with some of the fast-paced games I like to play, it just can't keep up. I don't really love the HDR mode here for gaming because it's kind of like a fake HDR. The display just doesn't get that bright. It doesn't really have good contrast. So what ends up happening is everything just looks sharp and the whites just look way too bright and the shadows lose detail. When I turned off the HDR mode, I think the games looked a lot better. The colors seemed more true to life, and the image didn't have that over-sharpened, over-brightened look to it. And that goes for movies too, honestly. I would just leave HDR off on this TV entirely because it just doesn't have the capabilities to make it look good. One thing I almost forgot to mention is sound, just because I wouldn't rely on the built-in speakers if you're going to be watching a lot of movies and stuff. It's fine if you're just going to stick this TV in the background. It's a little bit tinny and the bass just isn't there at all. Pretty much any soundbar or small speaker is going to sound a whole lot better than what's built in here. On the back here, you get 3 HDMI ports, including an eARC port, and you also get video composite with left and right audio in, which is pretty cool if you have retro games, but you don't get component. Next, we have the TCL QM7K. It's a step above the QM6K, which is widely considered to be the best budget TV. This one's about $100 more expensive, and at 55 inches, it can be had for $600 to $800, depending on the deal. This one's just packed with features. 4K QLED with local dimming, HDR Dolby Vision, and 144Hz refresh rate that can be boosted to 240Hz variable for gaming. I really like the look of this TV. It almost looks like an OLED with its deep black glossy screen, but I don't love the central stand here because that does make it hard to use a soundbar. This TV does tout that sound is tuned by Bang & Olufsen, which has some cool looking woofers on the back, but let's be real, you're just not going to get great sound out of a TV in this price range. It boots up quick and we're greeted with a Google TV interface. Now, I think Google TV is one of the best menu systems. It's intuitive and easy to use. You can download pretty much any streaming app here, but you are still going to get some banner ads. So booting up ELF and Dolby Vision, this TV does use true Dolby Vision HDR, and I will say it looks absolutely incredible here. It's leaps and bounds better than what we saw in the Amazon Fire TV. The brights look really great here. The darks, the shadows, the black levels look absolutely amazing. You don't lose too much detail here. It's not quite OLED levels, but I will say it does look a whole lot better than what I've seen in most comparable LED and QLED sets at this price point. Something that's super cool about this TV is it will detect what type of HDR content you're watching, whether that's HDR10, whether that's Dolby Vision, and it will set the picture settings accordingly. Right now we can see it automatically detected this is in Dolby Vision and it set the picture quality at Dolby Vision Dark. And what that means is no motion processing, no motion smoothing, no motion clarity. This is as true to life as the filmmaker intended. If you're watching something in HDR Dolby Vision, I'd highly recommend just leaving it on the dark Dolby Vision setting. If we set it to bright, you can see a little bit more motion smoothing. You can kind of get that soap opera effect. Now, some people really like this. I tend to like leaving it off. I want to give kudos to TCL here because they trust you to customize your own picture settings if that's what you want to do, which is awesome for people like me who like to nerd out on the settings and tweak it to see the best possible image. Like I said, the picture gets pretty bright here. It's about 2600 nits maxed out brightness, which is really, really good in this price point. Now, the one knock I will give on this TV is that the color accuracy just isn't quite as good as some other comparable models in this price range. It's still good, but you will see a warm tinge being applied to some of the filmmaker and Dolby Vision modes, and that's because this TV does kind of have a naturally blue cast to it. So to compensate for that, they end up warming up the image in some of these movie and Dolby Vision modes, so the reds tend to be a little bit more saturated in the color cast here. Now here I have a 1080p movie that's not in HDR, and we're on the standard picture mode, which sets the brightness to about 16 out of 100. So it's noticeably dimmer than what you're gonna get with a Dolby Vision or an HDR mode, but it still looks really good on standard mode here. Whatever upscaling TCL uses here looks phenomenal. I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you the difference if this was 1080p or 4K without getting really close to the screen. If we dive into the picture settings, we have a few different options here, including filmmaker mode, which TCL recently added. This is my favorite mode because it doesn't add any of that motion smoothing or clarity effect or anything like that. This is the most true to life, true to the creator's intent of the image that you're going to see. And again, it doesn't overly brighten the image. It's only at 16 out of 100 on the brightness setting. We can boost that up, which is great. But honestly, leaving this on filmmaker mode and leaving everything else standard is my favorite and preferred option for this TV of anything that's not in HDR. There's also an intelligent mode here, which some folks might like, which automatically does all the settings for you depending on the brightness of the environment that the TV's in. To me, this isn't my favorite. It just looks too unnatural, but hey, some people might like it. Now, if we turn the lights on, I was really worried about that glossy screen, but it actually does a really good job cutting down glare. The image is perfectly bright and easy to see in a well-lit room. But if we creep over to the side here, at this viewing angle, we do lose a considerable amount of contrast. Again, that's an issue with pretty much any LED or QLED in this price range. It does a lot better job than most, but it's still not perfect. It's still not as good as what you're going to get from an OLED. And if we boot up the PS5, we're greeted with the game bar, which is a special menu mode for gaming. It's really cool, actually. I haven't seen this in a TV in this price point, and it allows for variable refresh rate, low latency. It gives you a game picture mode, shadow enhancement, and an aiming aid, which is kind of cool. And wow, this looks incredible. This is honestly probably the best display I've seen under $1,000 for gaming. The variable refresh rate technology on this TV does an amazing job eliminating screen tearing here. So motion looks super smooth and you don't get that judder and shuddery effect that you do get with some other TVs in this price point. They did a really nice job with the standard HDR modes here because this looks natural. The colors look great. The brightness isn't overly bright. There's still detail in the shadows. One thing I will say about the black levels on this TV though, they are really, really good for a QLED, but they're not perfect. So you're going to get the best experience sitting directly in front of the TV at eye level. But for being a QLED with local dimming, this is honestly one of the best. So the last thing I want to touch on here is the HDMI inputs. You get 4 of them. 3 of them are 4K at 144 Hertz, and the 4th is 4K eARC. And I love the fact that they actually separated the 4K eARC port from the others that have 144 Hertz, so you're getting the best of both worlds. The only thing I don't love is that the power is on the opposite side of the ports of the TV. So the cable management here is a little bit tricky. If you have everything powered to one side, just keep that in mind that you will need to run the power cord from the opposite end of the TV. And finally, we have the Hisense U7 series ULED TV at 55 inches. This one's very similar to the TCL QM7K. It's about the same price. I've seen it more expensive. I've seen it less expensive depending on the deal. You can probably find one in this size right around $500 to $900. If you want to spend a little bit less than that, you can go with the U6 series, which is also a very good budget option. It doesn't get nearly as bright, so if you do have some extra cash, I would highly recommend bumping up to the U7. The Hisense looks almost identical to the TCL QM7K. It's got that nice, deep, glossy black finish on the screen, almost a mirror-like finish, but it has a pass-through for the front stand, which is nice for cable management, or if you're gonna run a sound bar. You will need to set the soundbar on top of the stand, which I don't love, and it might block the bottom part of the screen, but hey, at least you have a pass-through for wires. And it's a Google TV, so you're gonna see pretty much the same menu options and features with a few tweaks here and there. Now, what separates the Hisense from the TCL here is brightness and refresh rate. The Hisense actually gets a little bit brighter. It has 3000 max nits brightness versus the TCL QM7K's 2600. And the Hisense has a little bit higher refresh rate at 4K. You're gonna get 165 Hertz versus 144 Hertz on the TCL. Jumping into Dolby Vision HDR content here. This actually isn't in HDR. I don't know what's going on here. We're going to jump into the menu here, and it looks like the energy saver mode was applied and it didn't automatically go into Dolby Vision. This may be a bug, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to automatically apply in HDR mode when I'm opening Dolby Vision content. I actually have to go back out of the content, reload it, and then for whatever reason, now it recognizes the Dolby Vision signal and applies the Dolby Vision HDR mode. So on default here, it actually applies the Dolby Vision IQ mode, which maxes out the brightness. And in a dark room like this, it just looks way too bright and unnatural. And that also adds some motion smoothing, which I don't love. So we're going to set it to Dolby Vision Dark, which doesn't have any motion smoothing or anything like that. And it's much less bright. Now, this looks a whole lot better. This looks very, very similar to what we saw with the TCL QM7K. It is a great picture. Having the Hisense and TCL side by side in a darkroom, I would have a very hard time telling you just which one was which. I do think the TCL edges it out just a bit in contrast and black levels, maybe on color too, but the Hisense looks really, really good. Now, one thing I do want to point out here, for whatever reason, the Hisense doesn't allow you to adjust the brightness if you are in the Dolby Vision dark mode. You can adjust the contrast and some other dynamic options, but brightness, you're locked out. Like I said, the colors look great here. They are a little bit too warm for my liking on this Dolby Vision dark mode. You can change that in the warm settings. The shadows and black levels are just a step down from what you're going to see with the TCL. They're still pretty good, but they're just not quite as true to life contrast as I'd like to see for HDR content. Now let's take a look at Indiana Jones in SDR at 1080p. And the image looks a lot worse. That's mostly because I have it on the default picture setting, which is energy saver mode. It's just way too bright and overly sharpened, and it has motion smoothing applied, and the picture here just does not look good at all. Fortunately, this TV does have a few other modes like theater night, theater day, and filmmaker mode, which I highly recommend turning on if you're going to be watching movies. It's my favorite mode. It's very similar to what you're going to see with the TCL, and I recommend just leaving this on. I think this looks pretty good, but it is noticeably bright. So if you are in a dark room like I am here, I'd recommend turning the brightness down somewhere between 20 and 30. Guys, it's so hard to tell which is actually better, the TCL or the Hisense in terms of picture quality. Even at 1080p and SDR, this looks really, really good. It looks like high quality 4K. So the upscaling is incredible in these TVs. The Hisense is noticeably brighter though, cranking the brightness all the way up to 100, which I would never do in a darkly lit room. This is super bright. In terms of picture settings, you're going to get pretty much everything you can with the TCL here. You can dive into all these menus and tweak the brightness, contrast, HDR effects, motion smoothing, all that. In a dark room, I'd be hard pressed to tell you what's the better option, the Hisense or the TCL. I think what it comes down to is having the extra brightness in the Hisense or a little bit better black levels and darks for the TCL. Now let's turn on the lights and go back to Dolby Vision HDR. And there is some glare. There is some reflection here. It's not too bad, but there is a very glossy screen. So if you do have direct lights behind you, just keep that in mind that if you're on the Dolby Vision dark mode, it is noticeably darker in a brightly lit room, and without the ability to adjust your brightness in Dolby Vision dark, the image here, I would honestly recommend switching into one of the Dolby Vision IQ or Dolby Vision custom modes to raise that brightness. If we slide off to the side here, things get worse. There is a lot more glare and we start to lose contrast. Probably a little bit worse than what you're going to see in the TCL. And dark scenes like this they're really hard to see. So no surprise here for a mini LED, you're gonna get the best picture if you sit dead on. Booting up the PS5, we are greeted with another game mode, very similar to what we saw with the TCL. There's a lot of settings you can customize here, and on default, it has HDR game mode set to on. You can change this for various input settings like theater mode, filmmaker mode, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just gonna leave it on game mode and everything on default. The HDR game mode here looks great. I really don't have too many complaints other than I do think it's a little bit overly bright, and I think it's doing that to compensate for the HDR image here. I'd probably turn that down a little bit. Other than that, it has a great refresh rate here. It's 165 Hertz. It has variable refresh rate. That eliminates screen tearing. Games on this look fantastic, just like the TCL. And there's a lot you can customize here with your picture settings to find a mode that works right for you. A final point I wanted to make here on black levels is with gaming, especially on these more budget and even mid-tier TVs, which predominantly are LCD and some version of LED technology. They just don't have the black levels that you're going to get with OLED. And that's really apparent in gaming with dark scenery and dark environments where you sometimes really need that contrast in those black levels to enjoy your experience. Don't get me wrong, most games look great on this TV, but for me personally, if you want a gaming TV, this is where I would draw the cutoff, the TCL QM7K being a little bit better. Anything below that I really wouldn't bother with in terms of gaming quality. I would wait until one of these models comes on sale and get it for a lower price, and really try to stretch your dollars if you can and just go for the U7 or the QM7K. And if we go to the back here, we have the power on one side and the inputs on the other with a nice woofer in the back. Very similar to the TCL again. You're gonna get 4 HDMI inputs, 4K at 165 Hertz, one of them being an HDMI eARC port, which is great. So after doing a bunch of research and testing out a few options for myself, here's what I'll say. The difference between a $200 TV and a $500 TV is a whole lot greater than a $500 TV and a $1,000 TV. If you want a relatively cheap TV and you really care about picture quality and gaming, I'd highly encourage you to look at more of a premium budget TV rather than a bargain basement option. For about $500, you can get a really solid QLED TV right now, and the two that I'd recommend are the TCL QM7K and the Hisense U7 series. And if you need one that's just a little bit cheaper, I'd recommend the TCL QM6K or the Hisense U6 series. These are still very good options. So which one am I gonna keep? Personally, I'm keeping the TCL QM7K because I got a great deal on it, and I think it slightly edges out the Hisense in picture quality for my needs. But honestly, you can't go wrong with either option. So thanks for watching, and let me know down in the comments below, what is your favorite budget TV and what kind of deal did you get on it?